I know we've got a few more just coming in the door now, so that's good. We're just about to start our hui, so that's good timing, Puiwi Kelly. Right, so I'll say the karakia. Welcome, everybody. Whakataku te hau ki te uru. Whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia māt kina kina ke uta. Kia mā tara tara ki tai. E hi aki ana te atakura. He teo, he huka, he hauhu. Ti hei, Māori ora. I don't believe I have any apologies. The Mayor is going to be 15 minutes late, so...
Oh, sorry.
She's just arrived. So I don't think we need that apology. We've got online Councillor McNulty and some...
Oh, that's staff.
Yeah, some other people. So we're all here.
Yeah.
Right, brilliant. Conflict of interest declarations. Do we have any of those? Don't see any of those. Confirmation of minutes. So I move the motion that the committee approves the minutes of our last meeting, which was held on the 4th of April 2024, which have been circulated, and that they be taken as read and confirmed as an accurate record of that meeting. Thank you, Puiwi Kelly, for seconding. I'll put that motion, and if you don't mind voting now. Well, we haven't got Councillor Calvert. Okay. She stepped out for a minute. Okay, so that was carried. And we have no items not on the agenda, and I believe we do have one public participant. So I would like to invite you now to come up. Lovely to see you again after last night. And it's 5 minutes, and that does need to include questions.
Sure. Kia ora. I think on balance I prefer it when there are more submitters. I'm feeling somewhat outnumbered. Thanks for hearing what I've got to say about parking. I was a bit of a late request. We've all talked a lot about it, but I still found that the papers were... we didn't hear very much about Berempore, and what I really noticed through looking through the papers and listening to the submissions is that we have a parking scheme that's divided our little two suburbs into 3 areas, but my sense is still that the concerns are very, very local. I would call them hyper-local, and so for me, the solution that has been proposed does not appear to work across the suburb, and I would really advocate for continued. I know there has been some tailoring, but I would advocate to continue with that tailoring. Just as an example, where I live on Adelaide Road, the main parking pressure comes from Wakefield Park at the moment, people using that regional sports facility, and soon added to that, a lot of parking will go from there for the cycleway. On the current proposal, I, like many others, have got a little bit hung up on the cost. It's quite interesting to have one group of residents that would suddenly need to pay to park their cars. I actually wonder why, if you are feeling, like I'd say, have the courage of your convictions and tell everyone in Wellington who wants to park their car on the street that needs to be paid. It seems a little bit harsh from my perspective to say, don't park on the street anymore because we need it for a cycleway, and sorry that those options for your side streets, sorry you live in one of those really tricky areas where the side streets are up steps or down a path, or that 19th steepest street in Wellington, which is where we will keep parking our car. But, I have that feeling that quite a bit is being asked of us to do this other move, which is good for the city as a whole, and then we are being told that we need to pay for that as well, and I can't quite understand that on a principle basis. It's also interesting to me that as a visitor to the area, one could drive in and park their car for 3 hours and drive out again and then not need to pay. So obviously there's some other benefits which are being seen there for people being able to move around or come in and out the suburb. But I do kind of flag that as something for consideration. Linked to the paying, there's this thorny issue of kind of the social makeup of our suburbs. There are a lot of low-income people, and I see that council has run into this tricky thing around the proposal of using community services cards as a mechanism to assess eligibility for a lower cost scheme. Just noting that you have already chosen to do that for the leisure card scheme. Presumably you were aware of the legal risk when you did that, and maybe you decided it was okay because you're only opening yourselves up to a $1,000 fine for breaching those regulations where you asked to see someone's community services card. So potentially that mechanism could still be used. I would really like to find a way to, if this goes through and if it has a cost attached, I would really like to find a way to support those people, of which there are many. And, you know, the paper kind of talks about we don't want to be accused of not addressing strategic risks. So I think ageing population gets one mention somewhere in the parking policy, but we really do have an ageing population, and I think that that those people's transport needs has not really been adequately considered with the, you know, kind of quite wholesale removal of parking in my area. Question still remaining for me over whether this scheme as proposed really does implement the parking policy. It seems pretty clear that if you're in an inner city suburb, that residents are classed as high priority, short-term parkers are classed as medium. So I'm not talking about Adelaide Road here because that would be a different rule because it's the kind of main transport route. But on those side streets, it does appear to me that the parking policy would support actually prioritising residents. And my suggestion is to actually do that, put in some residents-only zones separate to the visitors to the suburb, and also put in some loading zones so we can do all of the big jobs for our houses where we're not actually going to be able to access the properties anymore. At least maybe consider giving us something that's close by, 0 seconds. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Elspeth. I will allow a couple of questions because you are the only ones and you have come in, so we value your input. Councillor Chung, and then Councillor.
Thank you very much for this. You've actually raised a very good point that I hadn't thought about before about the elderly. Now, do you think that we could put the elderly onto the same category as disabled people or leisure card holders? Because I'm thinking that elderly people don't use their cars very much, so then they would need a parking space for them somewhere.
I think with the elderly, two things have been coming up in my suburb. One is absolutely money, and I know some people find that hard to believe, but people are really concerned about the cost. And the second thing is actually just getting to their car. So, yep, maybe they can't afford to drive very much, but some of my neighbours also can't actually walk that far to get to their cars. So that's a bit of a consideration for me. So I kind of had this example that where I live, it's no good telling me that only 25% of Berhampore is restricted and that I could go and park on Deputy Mayor Foon Street because it's actually 10 minutes away from me. So I think for people who are finding it hard to get around, squeeze where they can park, you know, give elderly people somewhere they can park that's closer to their house.
Okay, thanks. Can I, second part of the question?
There's two others,
okay.
Councillors, but I'll keep it very tight.
Okay, how would you define elderly then as being, say, over 65? Use the standard description of it, or because it's going to be quite hard, isn't it? Because how would you define that?
I haven't given any thought to that.
Fair enough.
Right,
thank you, Councillor Chung, and we've got a couple more questions. So, Deputy Mayor Foon.
Thanks, Elspeth, for coming in again and for paying attention on this plan. What I just wanted to check with you, have you seen what officers have now proposed and appreciating your what you've just said about the reduction, but just around the corner from you there is a no park zone, so there is a no restriction zone, so there would be an opportunity to not have to be part of the scheme for you. Have you seen that?
I've seen that. So, but that area is also one where council is being asked to approve all the entire traffic resolution today, is my understanding, and then just sort of activate that zone later if I believe the Chief Planning Officer decides that there is the evidence base to do so. So it could still kind of it could jump into the zone later without any further need for public consultation. That was my understanding of that. So
okay, so in the 18 months, or when we go to review it, that could creep in then. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor McNulty.
I'm good, thanks.
I'll sneak in a quick one then. Would it give you a little bit of comfort if you thought that councillors would have another look before extending the zone, rather than it being left to our staff?
I did look at that ability to make that decision, sitting with that person on the SLT, and kind of went, oh, what checks and balances are there on that decision-making power? And I wrote in here, yes, I'd prefer to see something that I felt was more collaborative.
Okay, so we do have some amendments coming, but thank you very much, Elspeth. That's very appreciated.
Thanks for the time.
All right, so we will move to our one paper of the day. So I would now take a lot of pleasure in inviting Mr. Paul Barker up to introduce the report. And Mr. Kevin Black and Renee. Sorry, don't know your last name. Floor is yours.
Thank you, councillors. There won't be an introduction today. We're just going to take the paper as read, and I guess I'm aware there's a number of amendments to be tabled. I think I've worked through most of those, but we'll take questions.
I haven't had a chance to see some of the amendments in their final form. I'm aware of the one I'm bringing as part of the substantive. Do you have a reasonable degree of comfort with those amendments now that they've been crafted, or are there some fishhooks that you would like to point out?
Look, I think we'll wait for those amendments to be tabled and perhaps respond to them when they're tabled, just in case I haven't got them quite right. I have worked with Marcella in the drafting of those.
If I could ask for someone to print, because there's quite a bit. Is it possible to have a printout while we're... Okay. So we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they're about... Yeah, maybe if we take an adjournment and just make sure we're... Can I ask a question? Sure, yeah, right, okay. We don't need the adjournment just yet, we'll see if we need it. Okay, other questions? Councillor Abdurrahman.
Cool. Thank you so much, Paul, and the rest of you. I think this is really hard work. You have been doing it. And some of the question I will be asking you is not my question. It's nothing personal as well. And it's directed to the job. It's none of you. So here is my first question. Do you think the proposal itself has followed the right process?
So the proposal presented today follows the process as outlined in both the parking policy and then further to the guidance that was provided to us by the Environment and Infrastructure Committee at their meeting on the 30th of November. So we have followed both of those in preparing the traffic resolution that's being brought today.
Email that I received, and this constituent, he also came to do his oral submissions. He says this: it is clear that the proposed policy doesn't adhere to Principle B of the Parking Policy 2020. And he gives what that means and how that principle is not applied in coming to the decision that we're heading for today.
My parking policies over there.
So Principle B says, manage the decreasing supply of council-controlled parking by policy, how space is used, and who uses the space to achieve an optimum level of use. We have developed a parking space hierarchy for different parts of the city to ensure that limited parking supply is prioritized appropriately. The parking space hierarchy form as key part of the new parking policy.
Yeah, I believe we have followed that in the allocation of the parking for Newtown and Berhampore.
Again, during the oral submission, one of the Berhampore residents said, the plan is predetermined outcome, with Wellington City Council officers effectively discounting all the other options, and amongst all 14 options considered, despite the proposed scheme failing to align with Principle E of the WCC Parking Policy 2020. What do you say to that? Could you please respond to the point raised by this resident?
Yeah, look, that submitter made reference to the business case that we went through to support the introduction of a scheme. And that we looked at 14 options of how we might address parking in Newtown. Many of those, while they met they had clearly positive outcomes for climate effects. Most of them relied on introducing coupon parking or a parking charge of sorts to target the commuters that were coming into the area. When we then reflected it back onto the parking policy tells us to step through first. So first off, we introduced short-term or time-restricted parking with residents exempt, and when that's not working, then we step it up into paid parking. So many of those options and the favoured options that come out of the multi-criteria assessment weren't available to us through the way the parking policy guides us. So we then fell back onto the best options that were compliant with or met the needs of the policy.
If you don't mind, we'll keep moving and we can come back. So the next on the list is Deputy Mayor Foon, then Councillor Chung, and then Pawiwi Kelly. And Councillor.
Thank you for the mahi. Just think with the reduction of restricted parking, how do you think the parking plan will actually work now? Like, do you think that it will still work with that amount of reduction in the restricted parking area?
Well, thank you, Councillor. When we first introduced the scheme, and the scheme that was presented to the committee back in November, it was a 7-day-a-week scheme. And at that level, we felt that a lot more residents would have the need to take up a permit to utilise the park. So they were 2 hours, 7 days a week. As we've pulled back from that to now being 3 hours and only 5 days a week, we think there'll be a lot less demand for spaces. If we had the full complement of restrictions in place, that might be in contradiction to those that actually needed it. So they'd feel that they need to get a permit because most of the street was restricted. We've now pulled back on the restrictions again to address the concerns that came through in the consultation when we think we've got that balance about right. But there is that review built in. Should we not be correct, and that we have the additional restrictions still sitting there as a phase 2 that we're able to roll out. So my belief is the phase 1 is what we will need for now and for the foreseeable future. At some point beyond 18 months, we might need to bring back another traffic resolution to put the balance in, but that's where I'm thinking we are at.
Thank you, and we'll move to Councillor Chung. I was actually on my list.
Great, thanks. Referring to the earlier submission just now, she mentioned about the elderly, and I was thinking about that. If we should we actually be looking at something for the elderly? Because I tend to think that they don't use their cars every day because they'll be at home, and if they don't need to go out somewhere, then of course they'll have their cars parked outside. So what do you think about having some sort of concession for them? And are there very many of them? I don't know.
It was unclear as to what that concession would be. It would be a financial concession for the cost of the permit, or is it a concession to actually give them a space?
Probably a financial concession to be easier to manage, I would say. If you start making another category, it's be problematic.
Can I put that to Kevin Blake to answer?
I guess we'd need to investigate that. We haven't looked at that one particularly. I guess one of the issues again would be around eligibility. It's the same, I guess, as been talked about with the leisure card in terms of the eligibility for a leisure card is a lot wider than perhaps for a CSC card. So we would need to take that away and have a look and provide some advice.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Do we have any demographic information about how many there would be? Like, I don't have any idea. So would it be whether it's 50% or 10% of the population parking the cars here? I don't know. Do we have access to that information?
Yes, we do, but just, clarify the question. Do we,
so if we're looking at some sort of concession for the elderly.
So how many elderly are parking cars?
Yes.
We've got some census data that tells us the number of elderly living in these areas, and we have some data about the number of households that have a car associated. I'm not sure we can line up how many elderly have a car.
That's great.
We could perhaps find out whether we do have that information.
Yep. Oh, great. Yep. Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Keeping on, we will go to Paengawhāwhā Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. First of all, I guess, what defines elderly first? Don't be calling me elderly. Ask that. Hey, so I've got two questions to you. First of all, I was really impressed with the level of consultation and the mahi that our officers have done to get us to this space. And I just wanted to ask, because even while you're talking right now, you're thinking about other things, is there anything in your mind that you would have liked to have done differently that would be acceptable? Because what I'm trying to say is, I understand you've done a lot of mahi, and we're never going to please everybody. One of the big things is we don't have enough car parks. So in your mind, is there anything that you think, gee, it would be good if we could do this, that we could hear from you about and then help you make a decision? Before you answer that, the second question was, the previous submitter, she talked about the 3 hours that visitors that come into the area. But I note, though, that if you have a permit and you're a resident and you have a permit, you're exempt from that restriction. So did you want to expand on that as well?
Thank you. It's a big call as to what I would do. Look, I do believe we've got the scheme right. I've been involved in this, in fact, for looking at parking in Newtown when we first mooted a parking management plan was 2015, for either 14 or 15. So I've been with it since then. Probably the only change would be, on reflection, the move away from 2 hours to go to the 3 hours, feeling that that was a concession. I think in some ways that might have worked against us, and we're seeing that coming through. But we still believe at this stage a 3 hour restriction is appropriate. There is reviews built in, so we'll come back and test that. That second question really around the 3 hour parking, yes, the residents themselves, if they have a permit, are able to stay longer. All those residents that choose not to get a permit, they're able to park on that 3 hour zone. So from 5 p.m. at night, that means that at 8 p.m. the scheme stops and they're able to stay beyond that. And again in the morning, because the first 3 hours is free, the scheme begins at 8, and as long as their cars move by 11, they don't need to get a permit. So the 3 hours works for many residents that choose not to get a permit and just continue to live their lives as they do now if they're in and out of those spaces throughout the day.
Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. Given we have heard a lot from people about concerns about the whole scheme and the general big picture about how transport moves around those suburbs. So what's the principal driver from the timeline for this, for getting these things in place now, from your perspective?
So a number of things. We were looking to bring in a parking scheme some years ago to support the introduction of what we were calling the Newtown Connections, which was the precursor to the Berempore Newtown Cycleway. And that was the first time we were talking to the community in Newtown and Berempore about a parking management plan. That got overtaken by the development of the parking policy. And at that point, it was more than bikes. We were looking at the implications of Let's Get Wellington Moving and the need to address the parking issues, the long-standing parking issues in Newtown. And the parking policy itself accelerated the need for us to do something in Newtown and highlighted Newtown as being an area under pressure and needed to be addressed. The report back to committee in 2022, so that went to the Environment and Infrastructure Committee, or whatever it was called then, again reinforced that the Newtown parking scheme was the first priority and we were to get on with it. So if anything, we've dragged on this. It's not that we need to hurry this up, it's that we needed the instructions from councillors that wanted this scheme in place some time ago.
Has it got anything to do with needing funding for from government to put in the cycleways
No.
by a certain timeline?
There is a relationship between the cycleway between Berempore and Newtown, but that's not dependent on each other. So they're complementary projects and the timing works well. We know that the committee have approved the parking to be removed from parts of Berempore and Newtown, so Rintle Street, Luxford and Adelaide. The parking will be removed and it'll be removed in June. There's an opportunity for us to get this timed right so that when that parking's removed, there is a scheme sitting alongside that to mitigate the effects of losing that parking. But if the scheme weren't to go ahead, the parking removal has been approved and will still happen in June.
When you say the scheme wasn't going ahead, is there some chance that that scheme's not going ahead?
So if this committee choose not to go ahead with the Newtown Berempore parking management scheme,
yeah,
that doesn't have an effect on the parking. It doesn't have an effect on the walking, bus and cycle scheme.
Rightio, thank you.
Right, I think I put myself down next. I have questions about, actually probably to Kevin. What's going to be our approach if we get residents move into the area that actually need no mobility parks? Or maybe it's a question for you, Paul. Sorry, I didn't.
So it doesn't preclude us doing more residence parks. So if a resident has a need for a dedicated parking space in front of or close to their property as a mobility park, we would do that through a business as usual traffic resolution, just as we currently do. If it happened to be that that's been restricted as a P180, we would remove that P180 restriction, maybe allocate it somewhere else, but we would still assess and provide for a mobility permit park as needed.
So I'm thinking of this in the context not necessarily of elderly, but more of what elderly might mean in terms of mobility. We can still accommodate.
If their needs demonstrated, we will bring it to this committee for a decision. Yes.
Okay, and this one is for you, Kevin. It's just about the monitoring. Obviously, we're going to, the success of the scheme to some extent will depend on how closely we can make sure people are doing what they're meant to be doing. What extra resources are you planning to put in to monitor the scheme?
We're planning now for the fact that we will need to have additional resources in there initially, and so we will be redirecting resources from various other parts into Newtown as we need to. We'll obviously monitor how it goes when the scheme first goes in, and we'll keep reassessing as to what that means in terms of resourcing. But we are planning to have resourcing available in Newtown and Berempore when this goes live.
Yeah. And one more for you, Paul. Residence parking, we have had some interest in dedicated residence parking like the old scheme. Can that be done if there is a need and for whatever reason this scheme isn't meeting enough of the residents' needs? Is there the ability to put in some more targeted residence parking?
Thank you. The residence parking scheme as we know it, which we're calling the legacy scheme, the parking policy talks about moving away from those legacy schemes over time. So the existing ones that happen on the fringe of the central city, we will be moving away. That's the direction that we have been given from the policy. If the committee were of a mind that residence parking scheme was still appropriate, whether it's in this area or elsewhere, we would take our direction from council or from council laws or committee. the ability for us to put that in as a result of an amendment that comes to this committee, it's very difficult. That we haven't consulted on the residence parking scheme being extended or implemented into Berempore and Newtown. So we believe we'd need another traffic resolution to do that. But we could do that if that's where committee want us to go.
Okay, thank you. Back to the list, and Councillor Randall and then Councillor Rogers.
Yes, so just to be clear on this resolution, you're really including an amendment to the traffic resolution that was consulted on earlier on as part of this report. You're sort of saying, TR, what's it called, 15723 listed including amendments. So you're sort of changing that around a wee bit.
Sorry, what I've asked for is we've got a couple of small amendments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but basically the original traffic resolution plus some small amendments.
That's correct.
Okay. So does the original traffic resolution cover the entire area, or does it cover just the first phase?
No, the original traffic resolution is for all 3 areas and both phases. So it's to restrict approximately 2,500 spaces.
And so you talked about having a review after the phase 1. Who's going to decide whether phase 1's successful? Will that be brought back to council, or is it going to be?
But the recommendation in the paper, and I'm aware of an amendment to that, but the recommendation in the paper is that you agree on the thresholds to move us into phase 2. The burden of proof then comes to officers to demonstrate that we have met those thresholds and that now warrants us to move into phase 2. And as officers, we present that to the Chief Planning Officer to show that we've met those thresholds, and then those phase 2 restrictions that this committee would approve would then be implemented.
Okay. So also early on, and it was news to me, you said that the proposal you're putting together is what's required under the parking policy, and that coupon parking, which is paid parking, coupon parking options could not be considered as part of what you considered because the paid parking said you need to consider free options first. Is that?
Yeah, it guides us to step through the options and move through logically. So we would introduce a lower level of restrictions, so as we're proposing, the time limited. And then if that was still showing excessive demand and pressure on parking within that community, we would then step it up into paid parking, again, to aim for that.
Okay. So all of those that submitted saying that should be coupon parking in the various forms, you really couldn't consider that as an option because the parking policy says you can only consider free options, and only when they fail can you consider paid options for parking on public streets.
Well, that's absolutely the guidance that comes through in the policy. There's nothing stopping this committee jumping straight to another solution. It's just that's the way it was set out in the policy, and it's the option that officers have followed.
I just want to be clear, that's the option that officers felt that they needed to follow. Okay,
correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rogers.
Thank you very much for this. I just had one point of clarification. I noticed it referenced the $18 fee for each of the parks for the hospital, and I understand that's related to the equivalent coupon rate. If we were then to change that rate in the future, would that mean we'd have to come back to a decision to change the rate for the hospital, or is there a way that we could frame it so that it was continued to be updated to what an equivalent user would pay?
Yeah. We would frame it in a way, so the recommendation is that it would go through to the long-term plan committee and it'd be adopted, and we would frame that so that it was in the same fees and charges as coupon parking. As that adjusted, this would adjust, yes.
Perfect, thank you.
And just one further one from me, just a clarification around the $18 minus the user charges. I know you explained it to me, but it might be useful for everyone's understanding if we
I thought I did outline this in the briefing. The way we would expect this to work is that we would introduce paid parking for those 50 parking spaces. The authorised users, which are the hospital staff, would pay for that parking at a rate that we agreed with the hospital. So today, those hospital staff that get to park on campus pay $7.50 a day. So we would set the rate for Meehan Street at $7.50 a day for the user.
And they would pay that to our meter.
And they would pay that through a parking meter or through the app, and we would collect that $7.50 from the user that parked in that space for that day. All of that money over the month would be ring-fenced and be a discount from the $18. So we would then invoice the hospital the difference between what we collected from users and what the $18 per day for the 50 spaces would be for the month.
So we're basically guaranteed $18 a day.
Yeah, and the hospital would pay the difference. So they
overall,
would subsidise that difference, yeah.
Okay, that's it from my questions. Do we have some more from Councillor Abdurrahman?
Cool. I'm going to move away from the residents' question. That means I'm going to change the tone of my questioning, aligning with Auntie Lisa's line of question, which is, do you think you could have done differently in the future going ahead when it comes to consulting on the paper when it's, and this one is a bit tricky, you know, we consulted on the traffic resolution for the bike and bus improvement, but at the same time the parking management. For some residents that was a bit confusing, but now we hear, do you think going forward some lessons may have been learned?
Look, we've learned lots of lessons from this. The way the parking policy talks about the development of parking management plans being done with the community, so that we're to actually get some community feedback at the first level of developing a parking management plan, so it's tailored to that community. We had done some initial work with that community to understand where their pressures were, the number and the concerns that they have about the way they currently use parking in Berempore and Newtown. At that point, though, we hadn't framed it in a way that we understood what the options might be. So we've then gone back to that community with an engagement around the options to better frame that scheme and tailor it to that community. And as a result of that, we did tailor it. We moved it from 7 days to 5 days, from 2 hours to 3 hours, and made a number of other smaller changes. We then were able to bring back a traffic resolution. For the Wadestown community, we're doing things there slightly different. So we are going to that community with an idea of how a time-limited resident-exempt scheme might work, and we're getting that, so we're tailoring that. So when we go to the community formally, we're going with one consultation. We're not doing a two-stage engagement followed by a consultation, because we've done a lot of pre-engagement around the consultation that will be coming. So in the future, we would only have one formal consultation. Precursor to that, there would be lots of dialogue with that community.
My second question would be, regards to your suggestions, in the paper it clearly indicates that the majority of residents, businesses and people who work in the area seems to disagree or disapprove or strongly against the plan. How do you suggest that? Is that based on because of the current demand, or where that suggestion is coming from? I just want to understand.
And the paper goes some way to try and address where we think some of those concerns might have related to. We were, I guess, heartened by the fact that many people within Newtown felt for the commuters that come there. You know, although the biggest concern to the residents is not being able to get a car park because the streets are full of cars. They acknowledge that that's important. Who's driving those cars, and that's the hospital. So we heard a lot from that part of the community, and an awful lot of time of this committee has been around the hospital parking. Further afield, though, there is a lot of other issues throughout Berempore and the southern parts of Newtown. And their concerns seem to relate to, you know, why are we having to pay? The problem, perhaps the problem isn't as strong in those areas as it is closer to the hospital. What we're suggesting through here, though, is that we are going to see change. There's going to be change that will come about as a result of the cycleway, first off, the district plan changes that this council's made and the intensification that we expect. So over time, we are going to see this as both suburbs of Newtown and Berempore are going to see incredible change. And this is a parking scheme that then set up to future-proof for that pressure that's going to come on and give those residents that live there some certainty of parking availability.
Cool. This is to Kevin. Regards to monitoring it, so what that looks like, this is the new area. Some people just like it's natural. You just drop paper in their letterbox. Maybe they throw it away and they don't know what's coming up. So that means, are we straight away starting to fine if this is adopted? And if they are not applying for that scheme, or are we just giving them a warning for the little while, putting in their car for not getting that permit?
We're probably going to we would take the same approach as we have for the introduction of the bus lanes up in Newtown, where we offered a 2-week period where we issued warnings rather than actual infringements. So we would take that same approach with this.
Fantastic. My last question would be, if this council approves for the leisure card half price and for the disability card holders free, that means you can't straight away start it because there is no budget now, maybe. If that is the case, and in 3 months' time after July, once we adopt the policy, are you going to communicate that to some of the community members? Or this option is coming up, maybe, if you wanted to have that policy applied to your application, you can get it as 3 monthly for now, or are you planning to refund them?
No, we aren't looking at refunding people. So basically, if it is the decision of this committee and the LTP committee to agree to half price, then that would be communicated. But if people are wanting, so people would be able to make the decision to either apply now or wait until later on and apply after the July. And taking into account Paul's points before, there's going to be significantly more unrestricted parking available, so a lot of people may well decide that they don't need to apply for a permit immediately anyway.
All right.
Can I just add to that? It was just because I know where that question was coming from. There would also be an advantage of those people that would qualify should council approve a discount. They could apply for a 3-month permit. And I guess the question there is that whether our initial letters out to that community would give them a heads up that we are considering a lower fee that would be applicable from 1st of July. I'm just not sure whether we could do that. So we'll take some advice around from our communications team as to whether we ought to be putting in a letter out to residents that they may be able to get it cheaper. If you just apply for 3 months now, you might get it cheaper later, but that's probably subject to another council decision. It's just a bit messy, but that's where I think you're heading from. Yeah.
Thank you. Now I'm going to suggest we take a wee break. Thank you very much for answering all of our questions so competently, and patiently. So we'll take just to get the copies of the amendments, because there are a few. So is that going to work with the DEM Services team? Okay. Okay. So would 5 minutes be enough, or do we need a bit more? Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break until 5 to 2, just a bit over 5 minutes. a printout of all of our amendments collectively. Following conversations with officers just now, I've agreed to change the words in 5A that I'm moving with the substantive to a committee update rather than approval, because we're not, the thing we're going to be updated on will be the thing that's already actually happened. So we won't be able to have an update on Newtown East because there won't be a need to update that. So it makes things a little bit easier for the officers' from the officer's point of view too, a little bit more logical. And I'm happy enough to make that change. I assume that anyway, I'll talk more to it when I introduce the paper, which I'm going to do. So I'm going to move the following recommendations. I believe I have got a seconder. I think it's going to be, thank you, Councillor Rogers. So we'll just speak to this. It has been an immensely long process, and I really do thank our staff, and especially Paul. As you mentioned, this has been years, like almost a decade of thinking and working with the community in a way that collects information from them, speaking to them, drop-in sessions that have been associated with cycle plans. It really does go back a long way. And one thing I do know about this community is they're very community-minded. It's very evident from what's come through from this community that they care about all aspects of what goes on in their suburbs. They are very well aware of the pressures from the hospital, from the zoo, from schools, and also aware of their neighbours' needs. And we have heard a lot about how much people want this to work for everybody. I do have a reasonable amount of confidence in our officers, having also been involved in this sort of work for nearly a decade. I know that how much thought has gone into it and how much evidence has been collected to make sure that our officers do understand the types of parking needs that there are. And so I am personally very happy to approve the first stage of the Newtown West and Berrinpore parking plan. It has now been trimmed back so that it's much lower risk in terms of a change than it was initially. It will be a change, but it's not the bigger change that was initially proposed, and that has been in response to feedback. So I feel that it's okay to go ahead with this. We have thought about it for a long time. The community has been consulted on it. Yes, there has been some nervousness, and I think that's been reflected in some of the responses which have been received in opposition. But a lot of that I've seen through other work that we've done is nervousness. It is people know what they know, and the idea of any change is the unknown, and it always provokes a certain degree of anxiety amongst people, and that's very, very natural, which is why I did want to ask for a committee update. And I have got confidence that when we get this committee update on how the Newtown West and Berrinpore is going, we will just get the metrics of what's happening. We'll get the information about who's applied for permits, whether our actual priority plan is working as we thought. Somebody raised the issue, why are we doing it on the age of the house? Is that really the right way to go? We're actually giving priority to people who live in pre-1930s houses. Is that actually going to be the right thing to do? So it's those kind of, that sort of information that I'm really interested to know and to get feedback from. And I presume that if there are things we need to change, it won't just be an update. It may come with some more recommendations. If everything's fine, it'll be an update. I've also just changed the paper in a moving that we won't leave it to the Chief Planning Officer to approve stage 2. And he's actually quietly indicated to me he's quite happy for us to have that decision on our heads rather than his, that we will actually be the ones to have a look at how it's going before we implement the more restrictive provisions that we were initially going to implement. So with that, I'm happy to move the paper, and that's really all I can say. Do you want to speak later? Now, we do have quite a lot of amendments, so maybe we should be upfront and get those onto the table. I'd probably like to start with Councillor Calvert's, but it's up to her, of course. But, or would you like to start, Councillor Abdurrahman? Okay, well, you start with yours, but I thought Councillor Calvert's was a little more, you know, perhaps a little simpler. But anyway, you start with yours if you want to take it that way.
Okay, kia ora, friends. I think this has been going on for a very long time, and obviously officers, they did their best. And I want to acknowledge their hard work, especially Paul and your team, how you are very collected. And when we are having a lot of heated debate and, you know, consultation, not with me, but with some of the residents. So that I really appreciate it. And you know how hard it is. And I know how hard you've been working on this, and I want to acknowledge that first. I'm moving this amendment not only because I wanted, because I discussed with the community. They have been engaging with me for a very long time. And last night we also had a meeting, which I undermined actually when I called that meeting, and the place was just overcrowded. Even after I left 15 minutes later, Councillor Free, she was there, and I think she managed to get 15 or something of them who were behind the still. So this amendment was discussed, some of the amendment was discussed during that meeting, and the view in the community was diverse, I have to say that. But the majority of them agreed on some of this amendment. And the first one is similar to the amendment we previously approved in this council. That was to give free parking permit for disability card holders and half price for community card holders. But now we got a legal issue that came across, and the officers cannot do that, the half price for community card holders. But we can do if they have leisure cards. So that means I'm just changing that word from community card holders for now into leisure card, which is the council one, so they can get access to the parking permit at least once we approve after July. That is one of the most important one, which I'm really counting on all of you to support the community that really need it. You previously supported, and I'm also asking you for that. And the second part is, as part of the bike, bus, and pedestrian improvement that we're doing to connect Island Bay and Newtown, there are a lot of community members who are getting in front of their house losing car parks, and for which I supported the cycle lane. But I think it will be fair for us to support those residents by making it free, at least for the first year. Resident parking permit to be free for Laxford, Rental, and Adelaide Road residents. The third part of the amendment is to change the community card holders. We need to advocate to the central government. That means we need to write a letter, and I'm asking, that is under the Social and Culture and Economic Committee, the chair and the deputy chair, to write a letter to the central government and plus to local government New Zealand. And the fifth one is, even if they want to apply now, if there is no much funding, not budgeted for, what I'm asking is, we are planning to lease about 50 car parks to Newtown Hospital on a rate of $18 a day. My proposal is, that is going to be about $200,000 or above a year, rough estimate. We can subsidize the parking, the disability card holders and leisure card holders with that money. The other part of the amendment talks about how we need to engage further with local providers like the hospital and Mary Hospice and local businesses in Newtown and Berhampur, to offer them, if there is in any way we can do the same thing that we are offering Newtown Hospital. And we need to work with those businesses, and this is a pretty easy amendment for me, and I think I support all, if not all. I hope you can support some of them, and I will speak to the main paper later on, but that's my amendment, and I'm happy to respond later on if you have any questions during right of reply.
So before we second it, I think, and I presume you do have a seconder organised, we'll invite officers back because I'm sure there will be some questions on these amendments. Are there questions on the amendments? Yes. So if we could have you back to the table just for the interim while we work through the questions on these, because I think there'll be a few. Sorry about that.
Mine focus on governance, so I'm just wondering whether the officers are the right people. Might be Mr. Hodges.
Possibly.
Yeah.
No, he's here. So where you go?
Oh, I get to ask? No?
You get to go first.
Okay. So my questions are around the application of discounts for various groups of people, and for the for chairs of another instructing chairs of another committee to do another task. So first up, what is the implication of singling out discounts for a group using on this paper? And I'm saying, like, for people with a leisure card, when our actual funding policy that dictates how we use the leisure card does not allow for this. And I appreciate that you might not know because you're not normally involved with the funding policies. I forget the exact name of the policy, but we know what it means. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Councillor Calvert, I think your question is the LTP funding policy that supports,
which is coming up for coming up for review. Yeah.
I would probably have to take advice on that unless the team have thought that one through. I think this relates to the discount, the 50% discount. So,
but how does are we in conflict with our own policies around the use of, and the funding of this leisure card?
Yeah.
And how we charge?
So currently, Kevin, you've got your fee schedules out for consultation in the LTP, and would that schedule need to be amended? Is it minor, major?
Yes, those schedules would need to be updated if these amendments were to be agreed today.
And I think probably the easiest way to deal with it, if the decision was made today, is that when and as part of the adoption of the LTP, that the matter's properly articulated and council makes that decision.
Okay. And the other one is, if this council agrees that two other elected members should write to central government, under what authority? Because we can't really. I don't believe this is in the power of this committee to instruct another committee.
So I don't believe that we are instructing them through this recommendation. We'll be to adopt it. We're just asking them, recommending that they do this.
No, it says agree that the chair and deputy chair.
But if you look at the black writing at the very beginning of the 6, it says recommend that. We can legitimately recommend another committee consider something. I don't think we're telling them what to do.
Okay, so just in terms of how can we agree on something that is a fundamental policy change without going through policy advice?
It does sound like we need some democracy services advice on this one.
I'm just, because normally when we agree, we've had policy advice about what we can and how it impacts on our policies.
Ms. Parker,
sorry, I was actually looking at another issue about the amendment. What was the question? Were you asking regarding making a decision now without advice?
Yeah, well, it's basically asking, when we make submissions to the government, we normally use that on the basis of some analysis and our own policies. Now, one of these amendments is to, recommend to council that we write a letter to central government requesting to enable local government to use evidence of a community services card for eligibility for discounted council services. So for me, that is not just about parking, it's about broader than that, and how we could effectively approve such a amendment when we have not thought about the whole gamut of
I think
council
your
services.
question relates to, is this actually in our authority? Is this in our delegations to actually be putting a recommendation out about a broad issue such as 6C? Because we're talking about things that go well beyond our normal council matters, normal committee matters.
Right, so I suppose there's 2 points you can make here. The first is that you've got the opportunity to ask staff if there's anything that they have at this point. The second is that you're asking council to look at that decision itself. So you're making that recommendation through to council, you're not binding that.
And writing a letter to LGNZ, again, is probably in the same sort of vein, because again, it's writing a letter on behalf of this council, all agreeing that this council should do it without the relevant policy advice that sits behind it, which we don't have. So I'm just my question is really, are we able, is this actually a reasonable amendment, knowing that we haven't got any advice sitting behind it?
Councillor Kelly, do you have something useful to add for our process?
Rather than, because this part here, D, actually
is covered.
6 in the substantive.
7A.
And that seems to me to be an easier way that we're actually supporting an existing remit that Palmerston North Council have put forward, and it addresses what has been said. I know that what your amendment is going a little bit further and actually asking us to write a letter, but I personally don't think that that's needed.
We might be getting a little bit into debate, but I think we probably have to form our own views. I think what we're hearing from our Democracy Service Advisor is there's no reason why Councillor Abdurrahman couldn't propose these amendments, but we need to use our own judgment whether we choose to support them,
isn't it?
when the officer advice actually had something that probably addresses that issue. But anyway, we'll leave that to the debate.
I know, but can I just clarify? Because whilst it's under my amendment, is it actually under Councillor Abdurrahman's amendment?
Which is why I thought we might deal with yours first, to be really honest.
No. But the thing is, what is 7? Where does 7 come from? Because I've got 7 under my amendment, and that's not in my documents.
I think the difference. Well, I think the difference is because of the extensive nature of Councillor Abdurrahman's amendments, we've recut 6, 7 and 8.
And that's 7.
And that's why it doesn't read and flow as normal to Councillor Calvert's amendment. But I would draw Council to the 7A, which is a substantive, which deals with that Palmerston North City Council remit, which is also covered by Councillor Abdurrahman's request as well. So, and also to Ms Parker's advice around the fact that this is a recommendation to Council.
Okay, look, I take the point you're trying to make, Councillor Calvert, but I don't see any reason why Councillor Abdurrahman can't put this on here. We just need to deal with it in debate and in our voting process. Are there any other questions for, yes, let's move on. Councillor Chung.
Online.
Okay,
I've been online waiting for a while.
Okay. Okay, Councillor McNulty, you go.
That's fine for Ray to go. I just wanted to signal I was on the list.
Thanks.
Just a quick question. I seem to have read that any community card holder can automatically be granted a leisure card a leisure card. Is that correct? So we don't need to actually ask the government about community card holders because they can get a leisure card. So then we can control that. Is that correct?
Community card.
You can't ask me, I'm afraid. I don't know.
Oh.
community card is more beneficial because it gives you perks to a whole bunch of.
The officers will try to answer that. Councillor, the officers will have a crack at answering that for you.
Yeah, they can.
Maybe I'll give it a go. So, if you're eligible for a community services card, under the law, that doesn't automatically make you eligible for a leisure card. This council does take leisure card as eligibility as part of it, but it is what there are other instances when you can be successfully apply for a leisure card. It isn't just ring fenced to those who have a community services card.
Okay, Councillor McNulty.
Thank you. Two questions here. With leisure card holders, I understand, for instance, Wellington City Council staff are automatically leisure card holders. So Barbara McCarrow, for instance, would qualify for a free parking under this amendment. Is that a correct interpretation?
Is that true?
That was my understanding, but again, we have to check with the those within council that administer the leisure card. So leisure card is a discount card available to use at council facilities like pools and the gyms, and there is so yes, those on low-income families are able to apply for if they have a community service card, it is proof of eligibility to get a leisure card, but there's many other reasons why you would get a leisure card. So we're casting the net a lot wider than just a community services card, but it is a way of trying to capture the intent of low-income families.
Is it possible to get the other eligibilities beyond community service cards before we get substantively? Because that's a really concerning point to me, is how broad a leisure cards application or viability is.
So we've had a discussion amongst officers around this amendment as it came through this morning. Administratively, it's going to be very difficult for our processing team to get how we would actually process this. If it was a flatting situation, if one flatmate had a leisure card but another flatmate had a car and applied for a permit, is that close enough? They're both registered to the same address. It does open up a sort of myriad of issues with how we might administer the scheme and add the complexity and therefore adding to the cost of administering the scheme, and that added cost would come back in a fee charge going up in future years.
I appreciate that, but I guess I've tried to look online, even on our council website today, because I want to know who's eligible for a leisure card, and that we don't even stipulate it clearly in the council website. So that's, if that's possible to try and rush that information, my vote would be depending on how extensive is the net. So we know Wellington City Council staff can get a leisure card, the broader. The second question, so...
I think we've got an answer, Councillor. Council, we've got an answer there, so just bear with us and Kevin will respond.
Just on the staff eligible automatically for a leisure card, I've just had some advice that the answer to that is no. We've checked with our HR people and there is no automatic eligibility for a leisure card for a staff member.
Okay, that's nice to have that clarified. Thank you for getting that answer promptly.
I still don't have the actual answer though to what I'm asking is, who qualifies for a leisure card?
Are we getting a bit distracted?
No, Jen's got the answer.
Okay.
I can read reading from the Wellington City Council website. So a holder of a valid community services card, somebody living with a permanent disability or long-term health condition, or receiving support from partner organisations such as Age Concern, Dementia Wellington, so there's a list of partner agencies that we work with. So that's on the website.
Okay, thank you. That's useful. Does that answer your question, Councillor McNulty?
I mean, I would like to actually know exactly the full list, but that's the best I'm going to get at the moment, and I'll accept it.
Cool.
It's on the website.
So moving on, can we move on? Are you okay now with what you've heard? Okay. Councillor Randall.
Sorry, no, I'll move on.
Okay. I have a question. It's just about the use of the income from the 50 car parking spaces which we plan to lease to the hospital. Is it possible for us to use that money as a fund to support free or half price permits for other people.
Can I jump in? So a comment back to that is that at this stage we're not proposing to lease to we're proposing that we do a traffic resolution that proposes to lease to, and lease is the wrong word. I must caution you on that word lease. If this committee is of a mind, the officers would commence a process to start a traffic resolution, and we'll take some guidance from this committee as to whether we mention in that traffic resolution that the funding from those car parks be ring-fenced back to other things, and you can tell us what that would be. But our recommendation would be back to council, that council decides on how funding is allocated from the income stream that this will generate. I've been cautioning you to not predetermine the outcome of a future meeting of this committee that has agreed that the 50 car parks will be restricted. Our recommendation is that you ask us to start and commence a process to restrict up to 50 parks.
So I think there's a clear warning there that we can't make any decision on that at this point. So can I rule that amendment out of order, in fact, all of 7, apart from what was in the officer's original? I think I might have to rule it out of order. Sorry, Councillor Abdurrahman. I understand your intent, and it might be something that can come back at a more appropriate time. But right now, I think we need to take the 7A out, if you don't mind. In fact, I'm probably asking that we do. So we will scratch 7A. Can I ask a question? Are there any other amendments here that we probably need to rule out of order because they're not really able to be considered?
Cool. Before we move to that, Mr. Blake would like it.
Through the Chair, I just need to make clarification to that comment about staff eligibility. So
okay.
Staff are not, staff are eligible, but they're not automatically given a leisure card. So staff can apply for a leisure card, but they don't automatically get one just because they're a staff member.
Do they still have to go through the same checks of having a community services card and all of the other things?
Eligibility criteria will apply.
Okay.
But
okay. All righty.
Sorry, I did have a comment on other. You asked me if there was other concerns. We had amendments 3A and 3B, which we haven't talked about.
3A and 3D. Okay.
This is an amendment that proposes to not introduce time-limited restrictions, but instead introduce a residence parking zone 24/7. And these are couched that it looks like one or the other. I don't think it's both. A talks about all streets in the Berempore Newtown scheme, and B is just a selected number of streets. If that was to be approved, that is a completely new consultation. It's a new traffic resolution. I don't believe this committee, by amendment, can change the scale of the scheme from a blanket time restriction resident exempt to something that's very, very different. That brings in dedicated residence parking scheme as we've known it before.
Okay. So I might rule that out of order as well, because it's actually.
I think it's voting. You'd vote down the substantive.
Okay.
Just quite different.
Okay, so we wouldn't necessarily rule it out of order, but we'd have to vote down. This would only come in if the substantive was. Alrighty, that makes it really complicated. Can I perhaps ask the mover to offer to remove this one?
No.
Okay, all right. Okay, so if you do vote for this, we possibly will have a tricky bit in our process, but we'll see how this plays out. How does it work with, if we agree A, can we then vote for B? I mean, have we got a direct contradiction here?
It's not direct. Oh, I can't answer.
I need advice from Democracy Services on this. I would like to point out that I've asked a question too, that if our review or our update shows that we need to think about residence parking, we do have a process to consider that. But it would not be this process, it would be a subsequent process. Sorry, Ms. Parker. So my question is around 3A and B. Can we have them both?
Sorry, I'm trying to
yeah.
do two different.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're talking
they-
about Nuruddin's amendment.
Related but not.
Is it?
I don't know. I don't know.
Are they?
So it's not on here.
No, you need that.
So it looks like the councillor is foreshadowing kind of an amendment should it fall. Is that kind of the intent? And then I heard the officers talking about the scale of that and the required, process that would be incumbent upon the committee.
Okay.
Is that what you're reading, Chair?
Well, I guess if you take them one at a time, if we vote for A and it passes, just supposing, then B would be a relevant sort of thing.
Yeah, we wouldn't do that. I think normally you have somebody else foreshadow, and I suppose that Marcel is leaning forward into a microphone as well. It's lovely when the lead advisor is able to give the chance to do that, but you can only move one of those. We wouldn't have an amendment, both of those coming through when they contradict each other. So one of them is being foreshadowed. So, I would say that having moved this amendment, you would want one of your colleagues to be ready to, to foreshadow should this one fall.
Yes, okay. And just along the lines of predetermination of a process, which we haven't yet gone to, I think we also need to rule out of order 6E, because it's also related to the income generated from these, which we don't know whether we're even doing it, so at this point in time. Okay, I think I don't have any other questions about any of the other amendments. Does anyone else have questions? Yes, Councillor Paengawhāwhā Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 8, so isn't all what's in there, isn't that already in the paper? Aren't you already going to be doing all of that?
It appeared that these came out of that November 30 committee meeting where these were directed to officers. So look, it is in the paper. These are things that we're already doing.
Yeah, I think the Mary Potter thing, eh?
Yeah, and in fact all three of those, A, B and C. We are doing all three. I think the intent of this amendment was to push that report back to happen quicker. It was suggested to Councillor Abdurrahman that perhaps that report back happened at the same time as the report back that Councillor Free has asked for in the amended substantive. So rather than report back within 1 year or by the end of the year as it originally was, we're happy that that report back we would do as part of that overall report back on everything we've been doing.
Okay, I'm still not quite clear. So how I read it in the report was all of this was either you was doing it or it's already happened.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think.
So why would we?
I think what Paul's saying it's superfluous to actual what we're doing.
That's what I'm trying to say too. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right, but we'll let it stand. We can form our own views on that. Councillor Chung.
I'm getting a bit lost here. The printout that we have is different from what's on the screen here. So can we get a printout? Can we take a 5-minute recess and print out what's on the screen so that we can get up to date on what's?
No, that's there. It's there.
So where's the 3? We've got the 3.
It's under Nuruddin.
And I think while that's being sorted out, Councillor Rogers.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
I'll try not to confuse anyone in making this question. There was an amendment emailed around earlier around the parking permits and the accessibility of applying for them through the channels and whether it was purely digital or whether there was a non-digital option. And I was just wondering if there was a non-digital option for people.
Oh,
yes, there will be. So you'll be able to apply manually. So that's filling out a form and sending that in to us. I guess when you think about how day passes might work, if you're doing it online, it gives you a lot more self-service. You can do it yourself. If you're doing it in the manual option, you would then be looking to actually phone in to council to book those in advance if you needed them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you for that.
Okay, have we reached the end of the questions? Okay, thank you very much to the officers.
We'll go back there.
Yeah. Right, so we have a second. You've moved it. Do we have a second of these amendments? Thank you, Councillor Chung. Do you wish to speak now?
Well, he hasn't taken any of my amendments.
Okay.
That's what he agreed to.
So can I not second?
No.
Oh.
We'll need a separate seconder just to get it on the table. The Mayor. Lovely. Do you wish to speak now? No. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so do we have any debate on Councillor Abdurrahman's amendments? No. Yes, okay.
Okay. Look, I appreciate the sentiment of these amendments, and I will be supporting. I don't know which ones are still going through or not. But the ones where we are making more fundamental decisions around the use of leisure cards and charging, I can't do that. I think we need to do, if we're going to do any changes like that, we need to take a more holistic approach and understand what might be some, and consider what might be some unintended consequences. Because what we need to do is be fair to all Wellingtonians. We also need to understand is, can we, if we are putting this in, can we afford these changes as well? Because everything we do costs money. But as I said, I appreciate the sentiment, but for a lot of it, I won't be able to support.
Madam Mayor.
I must apologise. I got a bit confused. I thought I was actually seconding Councillor Calvert's, and I thought it was a time in history that we've come together. But however, I will speak to the amendments I've actually seconded. Look, again, I will echo similar comments. I appreciate the intent of these amendments, but I can't support them. But I really respect what the councillor is trying to do for his ward. But after hearing some of the answers from the officers, I won't be supporting them today. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Chung.
Right. Well, first of all, now that I've worked out who I'm seconding, I was actually moved by the submitter who talked about older age people, people older than me, and I think that's probably just as important as the disabled and the people on leisure cards. Just looking through the criteria for the leisure cards, and I would like to see these elder people sort of included in that. But I'm afraid that if I leave that for another meeting, then of course it's going to be too late to do it. So can we actually add that to Councillor? No, we can't. Oh, okay. So
but you can speak to it as you are doing.
So then how can we can't include it at all? Oh.
Not at this point, probably.
All right.
Right. I'm just going to. We are actually in debate. It's been a long day, and this is complicated. But we're just taking our time and working through it systematically. I really would like to thank Councillor Abdurrahman for putting such a lot of thought into his amendments, and I understand completely where he's coming from. I think, however, we have to trust the process a little bit, and some of these things have been put in our substantive by officers, and some of them may be things that we have to consider down the track when we've got to the point where they can be legitimately considered. I have a lot of sympathy with ring fencing that $18 if it comes to be, and we actually have some money and using that creatively to help other people. And I think the community would actually respond quite well to that, because I do hear of the concern that people have for the other members of their community and when they might be experiencing hardship. I think in terms of the elderly, hopefully we can address that through mobility parking, which we can go through our normal processes if we actually have someone with severe mobility needs. And that's really what being old sometimes means. It sometimes means your mobility is impacted. But we have ways of addressing that. So I have had a really careful look through these amendments, and I understand the spirit of them, but I'm probably not going to be supporting them. But I think the discussion has been valuable, and it's also highlighted our process and what we need to be respecting when we go through these processes. That's where I've ended up. Is there any further debate? Yes, Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, look, we pushed this paper back 2 weeks to allow more time for consideration for debate, and I've been left after the last 20 minutes of absolute schmozzle, wondering for what did we achieve. The stuff comes through so last minute. For those of us following at home, I have no idea what's still amended, what's still in the substantive. Teams is a nightmare to try and vote line by line. So there's probably some stuff in here that I might like, but the reality is I don't know even what I'm voting on at this point. So it's just going to be easy to go a blanket no across everything.
All right. And did I see someone else's hand up? Or Councillor Rogers?
Yeah, I had already sent some feedback to the councillor who raised this, and I thank them very much for working to the last minute with their community, and I appreciate bringing the concerns of that community to the table. I did have some concerns around just some of the work and how it contradicted perhaps a lot of the advice that we had received and a lot of the things that we had gone out to consultation with. I do definitely support making sure that people who need access to a private motor vehicle can do so and are enabled to get around the city in a way that works for them. But I do have to, in this case, agree with the course of action that officers have recommended in going about resolving that issue. I do think it's appropriate for us to support another council who has already identified this issue and support them in their work in doing this. And adding weight to that argument. I do also have some concerns around the leisure card, and that is not because I don't believe people who have a leisure card should have access to cheaper parking, but rather the administrative aspect of it in comparison to something that could be offered by the community services card if we had access to that data. It would just be a large administrative burden for our officers and would significantly increase the cost of this parking policy. And in an environment where every cent counts in this council, I think it is important that we support the way that would work across the country for other councils who are also feeling that pinch. And for that reason, I think the appropriate method for doing that is through supporting Palmerston North City Council.
Thank you. If there's no further debate, I'll ask if you'd like a right of reply.
Cool. Thank you again to you all. I think this is really interesting for the fact that some of the amendments that I move, 6C and D, 8A, B, C, is very similar to the officer's advice in the paper, except I changed a few things. However, that proves that how much of the paper reliance we usually go through instead of seeing it in a holistic way. Sometimes we're including me when making decisions. And I invite you all to just go back again and read it even after this paper, how the similarities of my amendment with the officer's advice and what is exactly different in that amendment. The most part that really saddens me today is this is the community that is vulnerable and really struggling in so many ways. At the time when we need to be supporting them, at the time when I thought we will be doing everything we can to find a way, first we blamed it on the legal system, even though we currently have. It doesn't allow you to use community cards when you go to swimming pool, but currently we do let people in. And if there was a willingness, we could have done some of these things. And I think that is really sad to see the community is going to be penalized for having this compared to other communities who live nearby. The second part is, what is the purpose of consultation? Let me ask you, why do we even do consultations? The big majority of residents either strongly opposed or opposed it. The majority of businesses opposed the plan. The majority of hospital workers opposed the plan. But guess what? We said, no, still we're going to go ahead. And the majority of residents who oppose, they say the reason is one of them is the financial burden of it. To add to that, for some of those residents, I'll give us an example, some of public submitters who came in many times did a submission. She is losing car park in front of her house for a good cause, which is a bike lane. Okay, she accepted. And now, to even get a parking near her area, she has to pay $200.
So, Councillor Abdurrahman, this is meant to be a right of reply, so just really addressing the things that have been raised by colleagues.
Yep, indirectly raised, so it's just a bit related.
Right.
So, yeah, so it is interesting for people not to see that. And for those communities, they hoped when they spend all their time to come and to do submission, when they did reading the paper, and when I met them, some of them last night, they say they read through the whole 200 pages to get what out of it. They opposed. When we call them, they come and they fit into it. Majority of them, they said, we don't need it, improve it. Still, we are going ahead. Nope, we know everything better than for you. And I think that is really, really sad. And I'm not sure if this is your area, how you're going to go back and explain in front of your community standing if you are not listening to them. And I'll leave all of you, if we're not going to listen to the community in such a way, when majority of them are opposing it and still we are going ahead, we don't need consultations. I don't see any purpose of consultation if we are not going to make the community listen to. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to ask us to vote on these amendments. Now, I have some concern that 8A of your amendments, Councillor Abdurrahman, is actually exactly the same as what the officers had as number 8. So if we were to vote against 8A in your amendments, we would then not be able to vote for number 8 in the main substantive. So it's exactly the same, isn't it? 8A and 8, yeah. Can we strike that out in your amendments? Because it's exact repeat of what's in the officer's advice.
It is, but that shows how much we're not even picking on some of the points. I purposely put that one. Thank you, Bo.
But I think it complicates things, especially for people online. Yeah, okay, thanks. So we'll actually just strike that out because it's a direct duplicate of...
Probably best like this, so it stays.
Okay, so it stays in black. All right, we fixed it. Okay, so it stays in black, so you know that that is actually the original officer's advice. All righty, now does anyone want to take anything separately? Councillor Chung, are you comfortable?
Can I just ask about 8B?
Because
didn't the officers just say that we shouldn't be discussing that because they haven't actually discussed that with the hospital, or they haven't confirmed that with the hospital yet?
What I understood them to say is they're doing a lot of this work anyway. It is there in the work program, and I think they didn't feel that this necessarily added anything. I'm just...
So is 8B superfluous then, or is it because it's going ahead, they're doing it anyway?
It's basically superfluous. Yeah. And so is 8C from my understanding. But yeah. Right, well, I'm going to be brave enough to suggest we pick up our voting things and start from the top and work down. So does anyone want to take anything separately with these amendments?
We're only dealing with the red bits, aren't we?
Yes, we are. Does anyone want to take anything separately? We're dealing with the red bits. Can we just make sure that we know what we're doing?
It has changed. These ones printed ones.
Yeah, so we're going off the screen. Is that okay for you, Councillor McNulty?
We've emailed him.
Look, I have no idea what I'm voting on, so I'm just giving a no because I have no clue.
All right. Okay. Does anyone want to take anything separately? I don't. Does anyone else? No? Okay, let's vote on everything that's red, which is Councillor Abdurrahman's amendments. Sometimes... Alrighty, so that has failed, but thank you very much for your work. We will now move to Councillor Calvert's amendment, which is a lot more straightforward, which is a new number 5. So, Councillor Calvert.
Okay, thank you. I've kept it very simple, but it probably has a significant impact. What I'm putting before you is that it's probably about the bigger picture. And when I think about Newtown and Berrenport, I think about what we actually want for the area. I think that we want an integrated transport plan for all users and cyclists, as well as vehicles and ambulances and all of that. We want to ensure our regional health precinct, which includes the regional public hospital, to be able to service the region and attract staff, because we know health workers are very much in demand, and we want them there because we need them to provide health services to us, to Wellingtonians, and to the broader region. And that includes people right up to Hawke's Bay. We want in that area, we want to support broader economic activity to support the local workers, to support the local residents so they don't have to travel far for their retail or their professional services or their hospitality. We want to support existing homeowners to enjoy the amenity on which they probably made the biggest purchase of their life and with the rules they thought. And we want to support further housing development. However, when you think about it, where is the big, cohesive placemaking plan for this area? We don't have it. We don't have a plan which actually identifies that there's this huge economic zone sitting in Newtown, which is the regional hospital precinct, and what it means and how we need to work with it. So I feel sorry for the officers because we have set them an impossible task. We've asked them to sort this whole issue out based on a parking management policy. And from what we've got is, what we're proposing is we're essentially offering nothing up for the locals. And whatever we may be offering them, they're paying for it. So, people expect the council, it's a quid pro quo, but we so often come in with the sticks rather than carrots first. And I acknowledge, I think it was Councillor Free, you said a decade of work has been leading to this. And I absolutely get that. But I think, sometimes you've got to look at the problems from a different way. If it's not working, think about it from a different perspective. And I'm thinking that we just do not understand how this whole area works. And so when we want to make changes, this is why we're meeting with so much opposition. And I know some of you might say, well, just stick it in, let's see how it works. But can I just tell you, just an email I got yesterday from a group of businesses in Thorndon Quay, and with the work that's happening there and it's gone on there, they're reporting a 50% reduction in their foot traffic. Their local cafe turnover is down 40% on the previous year. They're concerned that their rates are going to go up by a considerable amount of money. They also know the insurance is going up. So people are doing things tough. And we aren't able to adjust accordingly swiftly. So you might just say, put this in, but I'm also saying, are we able to deal in an agile way with the consequences? We know one of the big issues, and we've caused a lot of these problems ourselves. If you think about the regional hospital, we have not engaged with them at the right level and with the government of the day about an off-street car parking building. I checked with the previous MP, Paul Eagle, who was there for 6 years. No one ever approached him, whether it was council or the hospital, about support for an off-street car park building. We've allowed development to happen in Southern Cross Hospital, another big employer, and Wakefield, with no suitable off-street parking provided. And we've introduced new rules where you can intensify and you don't have to provide off-street parking. So we are part of the problem as well. So we need to be part of the solution. And part of the solution is saying we know the biggest issue is if we can get cars off the street And we know through providing off-street car parking in a car parking building. Now, we know the hospital is trying to do some work around that. We need to really put some pressure on. That is one thing the mayor could talk to government about. And we get it built. Now, if that's built in 2 or 3 years' time, which I'm assuming will be a car park building being built, we can then introduce a parking scheme. That's going to cater for a hell of a lot of the parks that we need. So that's the basis of my amendment. It's simple, but actually it does, I know it does delay things, but it's delaying them so that we can provide a solution, so we can provide the carrot first, finally, not the stick. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Now, do you have a seconder? As Councillor Chung, do you want to speak now?
Yes, thanks. In preparation for this, on Monday, I went out to Newtown and walked around and talked to the residents up there. Every person I spoke to, and I think I went out there about 9 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't leave until about 4 o'clock that afternoon. But every person I spoke to, walking along Ridderford Street and Rental Street up to the zoo, everyone I spoke to about this plan didn't want it. And so they said that they don't believe that the consultations are actually genuine, that the council has pre-decided that what they're going to do, and they consider that it shouldn't be implemented yet. Yes, they admitted that there were issues up there. There were issues with hospital workers, not Malvina Majors, sorry, the other hospice up there. Yes, sorry, Mary Potter Hospice. They said that they sympathise with those workers and they know some of them. They go up there and they look for car parks and it's a real issue. But making these changes is going to just make it even worse. And so in how many hours, there wasn't a single person who actually agreed with this. I don't believe that it should actually go ahead at all at the moment.
All right, thank you. Is there any other debate? Okay. Do you need a right of reply?
Since it's been one.
Sorry, I've just raised my hand.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you said no debate. Oh, sorry. Okay. Right. So, sorry, I actually thought there wasn't. Geordie, Ben, and Liz. Okay, Liz, we'll do it in that order. Liz, Geordie, and then Ben. Yeah.
Me first. Okay, thank you. I am not going to support this amendment, and essentially we've heard the officers talking about how long they've been, in particular our senior officer, what's his name? Paul. Sorry, Paul.
That's Paul.
That's Paul. Talking about he's been across this since 2015. So I think that councillors, particularly councillors that have been on this council for a long time, you need to be careful what you ask for, because you asked for this and now you've got it. And a lot of work has gone into it since 2015. And the comments that have been made about building a new car park building. Who's going to build that car park building? You know, we don't have the money for it. And the other hospitals that you talk, my understanding, well, last time I was there anyway, both Wakefield and Southern Cross have their own car parks, which is just addressing what Councillor Covert, what Diane said. I get your name wrong. Sorry. So I'm not going to support this amendment, and I think that I just want to commend the officers for all the mahi that they've done to get it this far. And yeah, kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, I guess I'm just reflecting on the delicious irony that probably about 5 hours ago that Councillor Calvert was telling us about how we were kicking things down the road in a council meeting, and here we are discussing an amendment to literally kick things down the road. Look, I think this would be the worst possible negotiation strategy with central government we could possibly go about. I'm imagining if Mayor Whānau went down to Minister Reddy's office tomorrow and said, so we need a new car parking building. Why's that? Well, we have a lack of car parking at the hospital. Oh, so what are the nurses doing now? Well, they're parking on the street. And what's your plan to do that? Well, in 3 years' time, we're going to introduce a scheme that 30% of those car parks are going to start to being restricted. He'd laugh. He would come back and go, oh, yeah, I'll definitely get around to that. I'll put that on the list. Like, it's laughable that in 3 years' time we're getting a car park building. This government is cancelling hospital projects across the country and shuttering things in healthcare. And we think we're going to get a car parking building, and we think we're going to leverage or strengthen our hand by delaying it for 3 years. There's an urgent need for car parking in Newtown now. We've authorised a district plan, which means there are going to be thousands of people moving into Newtown over the next decade. The regional health precinct is going to grow. All of those things are going to happen. Now, the easiest option, I'll take some of Councillor Randall's, the easy decision is just to stay with the status quo and just dig their head in the sand and go, oh well, don't need to worry about this. This could be something for the next council. The hard decision is actually to stand up and lead and do something about it. And kicking this down the road is the opposite of leadership. It is a political, just silly strategy that is not going to get us anywhere closer to a car parking building. Councillor Calvert is right. We do need to advocate, and I think that's something that the Mayor needs to bring up into central government on the level. That advocacy hasn't happened, and it does need to start. But this would actually severely weaken her hand in terms of that advocacy. So I won't be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Randall.
Thank you. So I'm going to urge Councillor McNulty to perhaps make his final decision on supporting it after I've spoken. I appreciate his point of view about kicking it, that this is kicking it down the road, but I don't think it is kicking it down the road genuinely. Officers have worked very hard, and I thank Paul and his team for all of the work that they've done. But the reality is, we still haven't got it right. And there's a key piece of new information that was outlined to me today, and that is that the parking policy has constrained the options that the officers can propose to us. We've still got a proposal that both residents and workers around the hospital largely reject. So we haven't got it right. We were aiming to get the residents on board, they're not on board. And therefore, I think we've got to work harder. Personally, and I'm very disappointed that we haven't considered a coupon parking system where workers pay to park long-term in an area that has real parking pressure. So the alternative we've given them is you cannot park there at all. And I think that's the wrong alternative. If the hospital hasn't got the parking building built, then they're going to have to fund workers to pay coupon parking, but at least they will be able to get a car park if it's free in those areas where it's free. We still have not got it right. We are supposed to be a council that goes and works for the community. And it is not leadership, I'm sorry, it is not leadership to come along and do something the community does not want to do. And that's the message that officers have reflected back to us, and they've been totally open and honest about that. This is no fault of the officers. The officers have worked through the process that this council has decided is the right process, but we haven't got it right. And Newtown is probably the thorniest area to pick as the first area for a parking management plan. If we're going to do these things, we should have picked an easy area, maybe Kilburnie. But there are certainly, there are things in here, and I particularly am concerned that this is the hospital, this is the regional hospital. We're not talking about people not being able to get, to work at a supermarket distribution centre or get to the warehouse. Okay, we're talking about our hospital, where we've got the pressure of hospital workers, patients, and visitors. It's a bit of a perfect storm, and no wonder it's hard work. But I would ask you really to consider supporting Councillor Calvert's motion on the basis that we really need to go and ask officers to go back and look at some of the options that they could not properly consider and propose to us, which is around a coupon parking based system. It's not really, and we don't want to be seen, and I don't think this committee should be seen as doing stuff to a community. I think we should be doing stuff for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rogers.
Thank you. Yeah, there are many things that I wish to raise in debating this amendment, but I think I'll save most of them for the overarching substantive, given I think that forms my holistic view of how I'm going to come to a decision on this. I do think there is some irony in this amendment, because if we're talking about the provision of car parking, whether you agree with whether people should be driving cars or not, and your goal was ultimately for hospital workers to have more parking, nothing to date has been more successful in getting us towards that goal and getting the hospital to build a car park than telling them that your staff might have to pay for parking on our streets. The proposals that we have put forward so far and have gone out to consultation with multiple times have inched the hospital towards realising that they have made a mistake in the way that they allow their staff to commute. I think to Councillor Calvert's point around looking holistically, many of the submitters that came in mentioned how they live further away because of the unaffordability of housing. And so I think when we do also put that lens over this parking policy and don't look at this parking policy narrowly, we do see that the extra provision of housing will enable people to live closer to where they work. And when that happens, we will need a scheme that is agile and able to adapt, which this scheme is, compared to coupon parking or resident parking, which would require further traffic resolutions. I think in this case, it would be irresponsible to delay this parking proposal. It would cement an already a proposal that's not already working, and especially when we have some certainty about what Newtown will look like within 3 years' time and can recognise that the status quo will not work in 3 years' time, to not try things now when it isn't as bad as we know it will be in 3 years' time would be a failure in my mind.
Okay. I think that's the end of the list, so I'll invite Councillor Calvert to have a right of reply, but could you keep it brief, if you don't mind?
Well, there's quite a few speakers.
Yeah, there were. Okay, you go for it. I'm just aware of the time as well.
Don't cut me down now,
oh,
Sarah.
No, definitely not. We're on good terms at the moment.
Exactly.
Go for it.
So don't push it. So, look, thank you. And I just want to say that, Puiwi, Kelly, Wakefield Hospital did build some parking, but they didn't build enough for the staff or make provision for that. And I think that's where we need to be as a council. We need to be more with our with our hospitals, with our businesses, about working with them in terms of when we know these developments are. Because if we're not, we've all seen the two-storey place down on Taranaki Street, not the best use of space. I find it is quite a bit of irony, and Councillor McNulty, giving me a political speech as a Labour Party councillor and telling me the government's laughable. But anyway, I'll take that in the context of which it was given. This is not kicking the can down the road. This is actually, and this is relating to Councillor Randall's comment, is about leadership. Because this is about saying this solution is not really going to work, and we need to do stuff for the community, not to the community. And it's the old saying, it's putting things right, and that's what we really need to do about this. And the parking is not just about hospital workers. If anybody's been to the hospital recently and tried to find a park, when you're trying to get there for a hospital appointment or to visit somebody in hospital, if you go at certain times, you can't find a space. And that's not just the regional hospital, but it's all the supporting services around there. And whilst I acknowledge people might want to work closer to where they work, if we think about Newtown and how it's going to be intensified, not everyone wants to live in, wants to choose a different form of housing. And so we need to enable that, because when we're attracting people to work in our regional hospital, we need to make sure we've got the best. And they may well not choose to live in Newtown, and we should not expect them to either. And we don't have certainty of what Newtown will look like in 3 years, because we do not have even a plan for the whole of the area. No, that's a zoning plan. We have no plan. We have no spatial, cohesive, place-making plan for that area. And we do not have it. It's not there. But if you could just control who's interrupting me all the time, that would be great. Thank you. So look, I ask for your support. I think we can work with the government, because if we don't ask them, we'll never know, and we've never asked them. And that is a failure of this council and the previous council. We've never, ever asked them. Thank you.
We shall vote on this. Thank you for keeping it nice and simple. It's just the one, number 5.
I'll take a division, please.
You may. So that has failed. All right, so we are back to the substantive. I have moved it. Geordie's reserved his right as seconder. Is there any debate on the main dish, the main serve? Councillor Abdurrahman. Now, we do want to keep these final speeches fairly to the point, because otherwise we are going to be here for a bit too long, I think.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Cool. Look, I do oppose this proposal for 3 reasons. But before that, I would like to say that the hard work that went to this, and how we need the parking management plan in Newtown especially. However, I don't think so this is the answer. And it's a time to prove it. My first reason is the process needs to improve, and because of the way this consultation went, and I don't want to go much deep into it, but just to highlight, at the beginning we started the consultation, merged together the traffic resolution for bike and bus improvement and the parking management plan. And then from there on we made decision in different committee, one in the Environment Infrastructure Committee, the other one in different. So I think that itself is very problematic. And the second one is consultation. I think we have a problem in general, and I think that is how the way local government works sometimes as well. But when the majority of people in such a way oppose, if we are, don't forget, this paper at the beginning says the reason we're doing is because the community want us. They requested for the parking management plan. But why, if we are doing for them, the majority of them saying, no, we don't need this plan? That shows the importance of parking management plan in the area, but this parking management plan is not the answer. And during the business case, I think there was other options that was put forward as a preferred option, but we didn't get into those things. I think maybe it's a time to internally go back and visit some of those decisions, and if we fail in any way internally, I think that is something we need to be working on as well. So the consultation part, and the first one, as I already said, it's the process. The third point is the impact. Even though it says it's just a medium, this is a very significant impact in the community. And we are doing it in a very specific area where equity is a big issue. And in this case, we are not even addressing these equity issues. Because of those 3 reasons and what I've heard from the community, we need parking management plan, but this one is not the answer. Now is not the time. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
fascinating that we spend so much time on parking. And it's a global issue. And so I just want to say I have been reading a book over summer called Paved Paradise. I highly recommend it. It's quite amazing how it's designed America, how people kill each other over parking, and how it dominates the style of cities we build. And here we are in Wellington, New Zealand, experiencing the same challenges as what are going on in the world. So I do want to really thank officers for an incredibly thorough process to get us to this point. I mean, really, it's quite incredible. So I hope we've done the groundwork well as we roll this out through the city. I also really want to thank our community, Newtown and Berhampore, for letting us know and spending the time. And I acknowledge that this has probably rocked many of your parking as normal world. But I actually think we've landed in a fair place with the reduction in the restricted proposed parking, and that it's a really good place to start to get used to it, and that we've got a review coming up to see how it is. And we need a solution for those, as we've heard over and over again, that are going to be impacted by the new bus and bike improvements, and as the demand for parking rises, particularly in Newtown. And parking is rising 3.9% in 2023. It's not going to stop. Car ownership is on the rise. It's not going to stop. So doing nothing is not an option. And if we're really talking about equity, you don't need to participate in the plan. You don't have to pay. You can park somewhere else, and there is ample place to park. And actually, equity means choosing the way you want to move around on our streets safely. And really, that's what this plan is supporting people that can and want to be able to do. Not everyone, not those that are driving in from Otaki, but reducing the number of cars being parked on the road so that people can move freely in other ways. That's the why. And just maybe you might not need a car, and then it won't be a problem for you in the future. Kia ora.
Thank you. We have Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much. Rather than reiterate what I said earlier regarding Councillor Calvert's amendment, I omitted to mention why I was even in Newtown last week, on Monday. It was, it's certainly not anywhere near my ward, but I was asked to go down there because they said that people are just not, they don't feel as if they're being listened to. They feel as if their ward councillors are not sort of understanding what their issues are and what their problems are. And so when they tried to explain to me about the issues, the problems that they're striking, they said, look, come down here, we'll even buy you a hamburger, and that sort of convinced me to come. And so I went down, and that's why I spent the whole of my day down there walking around, talking to people, asking them, what do they think about this? What would they actually like? What do they think about these issues with parking? I also heard from them about why they have a car. We've heard about the number of cars are going up and there's going to be even less place to park them. But then what are these people to do? And they explained to me why they need cars. Most of them need them to go to work, to actually take their big families, and I'm quite surprised by the size of the families there, but they need these big cars there. And so what are they to do? And so, of course, I went around there to ask them questions, but they turned around asking me questions about, tell me what the solution is. Now, I don't have a solution, but I think it's very, very important for us to listen to these constituents, someone else's constituents, because they're the ones that live in the city. They're the ones that are going to suffer or have to live by the changes that we actually make. So they are very, very important. I think they're the most important people that we should be listening to. So if we're not taking on board what they're saying, then what are we doing? And so I would like to thank Paul and Kevin and all the team that have worked on this. I think they've done a great job, but it's not quite there yet. We haven't solved these problems. It seems like no one is happy. The hospital workers aren't happy. The Mary Potter Hospice people aren't happy. The residents aren't happy. So I feel that there must be a solution. We need to work on it a bit more. We need to consider these things. Sort of looking at the amendments that came up, I'm thinking now more about what we were talking about with Nurin, talking about the disabled people. Look at the issues that they're going to have. The older people, how are they going to cope? And so I think it's a real issue that we haven't found a solution to help all these people. So I even though we talk about kicking the can down the road, and we talk about how long Kevin, and Paul have been working on this, I understand that. I acknowledge it, and I'm not criticising the job that they're doing at all. But I do think that we shouldn't be making decisions simply because we've been working on it for a long time and saying that, I've worked on it for so many years, I'm actually tired of it now. Let's go and do something, anything. Okay. So that's why I'd ask you to consider this proposal and see if you can think we can find another solution.
Okay, thank you. Now, are we back? Oh, Councillor Calvert, Geordie Rogers,
Apologies.
Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, I'll make this short. I was able to sit through some of the oral submissions, and one of the things that it made me realise is that there is so much to uncover about our conflict around parking. I then went on to read the same book that Deputy Mayor Foon was referencing, and I read it over in a weekend. It was incredibly riveting, which is surprising about parking, I think. It does come down to this question of why do so many people oppose the parking plan, and I think it is important to inquire into where that opposition comes from. And ultimately, when we talk about parking, it is a conflict of space. It is a conflict of who has the right to that space. And in some cases, people are open to compromise on that. They're happy to share. In many cases, people prefer the status quo that they have. They understand those rules, they live them every day, and so they can see how that is to relate. But in terms of actually moving forward and addressing some of the problems they do have with the status quo, it does require trying something new. Unfortunately, with finite space and a growing number of people, it does require compromise. And in the Green Party, that's around consensus decision making. And I'm glad to see that the officers have approached the community with open arms to say, within the framework that the council has voted for previously, how do we address some of the issues you have? I think that through what's been presented today, we do address some of those issues, especially around people who might hold a community services card. We have voted for an appropriate way, I think, in my mind, to actually go to the government and say, can you share that information with us so we can improve these people's lives in a way that is cost effective and easily and accessible for them. And one of the things that I was left with in that book was that the most successful way to force people into using cars is to delay the management of parking, regardless of what that management looks like. Some form of management is the way to help people out of cars by looking at other uses for that space. And so when I am approaching this, I think I have heard that people want to continue working on this, and I have no doubt that we will. Everything comes back to council. And so that's why I'm supporting this today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Calvert.
To make things easier, I'm very happy to, if you want to move them all together, because I will be not supporting the whole thing,
will be helpful
the whole thing
when we get there.
So when we get there, I'm really concerned that there's going to be an unintended consequence of gentrifying Newtown. It will go from hamburgers to quiche. And
KFC to quiche.
So, look, this council worked on Let's Get Welly Moving for 10 years and it was canned. So, look, I don't think we should be too precious. And again, it's like, people are just talking about the parking, the parks and the cars. It's not just about parking and cars. It's about people. And until we start actually designing our city from a proper spatial thing, not just pretty colours on a map from a zoning perspective, we will not get the city that meets the needs of most Wellingtonians. So I can't support this because the whole premise on which it's been based on is wrong policy and incomplete policy. So, as I said, happy to, if you want to move them all together, I'll just vote no for everything.
Right, Puiwi Kelly.
Well, thank you. I'll be very brief. I was smiling about, I wasn't going to say anything, but you spoke so eloquently, Councillor Rogers, but I was having a big smile because I remember when Annette King agreed for Wellington Hospital to be our regional hospital. And the biggest objection to that was parking. And of course, the other option was Porirua. There's no problem with parking in Kinaparu, and that all made sense, but it didn't happen. So I'm really sitting here just smiling about what we're having to deal with right now. But having said that, I am happy to support this recommendation, and I commend the officers for the mahi that they've done. It just amazes me how much passion the officers have in trying to work with everybody across so many levels to get something that works. I think that we are very lucky to have that calibre of officers at Wellington City Council. So I'm going to support this. Thank you guys for the mahi you did. Sorry it's taken, what, nine years? But we're there now. And I wanted to say that a community card is of much stronger significance to our vulnerable communities than a leisure card. It just covers so many different variables that a card to get you into different things isn't enough. And so thank you, officers. Thank you for the debate as well, but that's my takeaway that I'm going to be smiling about as I'm driving back to Porirua tonight. Yeah, they were all right. But we've landed at a good space. Thank you.
Yeah. Is there any further debate? Councillor McNulty? No? If not, I'll have my right of reply very briefly. Okay, I'm going for it. Thanks to everybody. Who could believe we would talk about parking for 2.5 hours? Honestly. With the hospital, they have passed a resolution when they had the old DHB that they would build a hospital, build a car park. I believe they've even looked at some of the designs and what have you. But we have now sharpened their focus. And if we were ever going to get a car park there, I believe that this is the way that it will happen. It will happen because it becomes clear to them that it needs to happen. And that possibly wasn't going to take place until we had put the pressure on. But I do thank the officers for the work that they've done, thinking about some mitigation for that in terms of the potential, 50 car parks up Main Street. That will soften the impact for the hospital staff. The other thing I'd like to say is, and thankfully also the hospital has travel plans that they've really seriously been thinking about for about 2 years, and we do have some extra bus services and shuttle buses and what have you. So there are other ways that this can be managed as well. But I've been reflecting on the debate, and I think that we forget. We've got rose-tinted glasses on about the current situation, and we're talking about how this is going to damage the community, but actually the current situation is not that great, and it's only going to get worse. So we can talk about we're not quite there yet, but heavens, we're actually more than having to do something about this, and we have to try something. So we're starting, in my mind, in the lowest risk way possible, and we're also mitigating the risk further by asking for reviews and updates. And I do know that there are still things we can do. We can still put in mobility parking. We can still bring residence parking if we need to. We can scale this up. We can scale it down. We can, stage the implementation. There's a lot of control we're going to have, but we have to start somewhere, and we won't get the information we need about how this is playing out until we actually try some of it, because a community and its car parking needs are an incredibly complex beast. I think there's been, I really do again thank Councillor Abdurrahman for the amendments which you've tried to bring in. You've given us a flavour of your thinking, and that won't be lost. That will be able to be picked up by other committees and even our committee in due course. So don't think that your efforts were in vain. They're not. We understand where you're coming from, and some of that is parked in my head to see if we can, if needs be, bring some of it back. I think we may just, after all this time, be ready to vote. I know Councillor Calvert didn't want to take anything separately. Just number 3, and then the rest all together as a request. Is there any other requests for anything to be taken separately? And I do also thank the staff for what's been protracted, and not to forget our wonderful Democracy Services staff who support the process, and thank you, Marcella and others. Right, so number 3, separately, and after that, everything together. All right. You can have a division. Yeah. So we're voting now on number 3. And that has carried, and then the rest all together. And that is carried, I presume. Sorry, I missed that, but I'm sure it did. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the meeting. We will now close with the closing karakia. Unahia, unahia, unahia ki te uru tapanui, ki awatia, ki mā, tēnā kau, te tinana, te wairua, te ara takatu. Koe rā I rongo, whakairia ake ki runga, kia wātia, ai rā, kua wātia. And we finished right on the dot of 3:30. Well done, everyone.